The city is still dark when the first cartwheel catches on a paving stone somewhere below your window, and the sound rolls up through the cold air like a single dropped coin. A dog barks once and goes quiet. Somewhere closer, water moves against stone. The river, low and steady, carrying the smell of mud and rope and grain dust up into the room where you lie still listening. Welcome to History of Ordinary People. Here we leave behind the famous names and step into the lives of the people who built the world around them. Live the lives history forgot. You're a grain merchant, and the world you wake into is not the world of senators or generals. It is the world of warehouses and weights, of sacks stacked higher than a man, and ledgers filled with names of ships that came in on the tide. Rome is a city that eats more than any city before it ever has, and somewhere between the harbour and the bakery, that hunger becomes your problem to solve. This morning, a new shipment has come in overnight, and something about it is already nagging at the back of your mind before you've even seen it. The room is cold enough that you can feel it on your face before you move. You lie still for a moment, listening to the building wake up around you, a door somewhere below, a voice calling out a name, the scrape of something heavy being dragged across stone. The warehouse district never fully sleeps, but there's a difference between the low hum of the night and the particular restlessness that comes before dawn, when the carts that aren't allowed to move during the day are making their last runs before the streets fill with people. You push back the blanket and sit up, feet finding the cold floor. There's a basin of water left from the night before, and you splash your face with it, the shock of it pulling you fully awake faster than anything else could. Your tunic hangs on its hook where you left it, and you pull it over your head, then reach for the belt, working it tight around your waist with hands that already know the motion without needing your eyes. A cloak goes over your shoulders next. The mornings by the river are damp in a way that gets into your bones, and you've learned not to go out without it, even in the warmer months. Breakfast is quick, the way it always is. A heel of yesterday's bread, torn rather than cut, and a cup of wine cut heavily with water, still cool from the night. You eat standing, looking out through the shutter at the lightening sky, where the river catches what little light there is and throws it back in pale streaks. Somewhere out there, past the rooftops, ships have been arriving through the night, and one of them, you've been told, is carrying grain that's been waiting for you since before you went to sleep. Out in the street the air is sharper than it was indoors, and it smells of the river, wet stone, tar, and underneath it all, the dry, dusty sweetness of grain that seems to soak into everything down here, no matter how far from the warehouses you stand. Other figures move through the half-dark with you, most of them heading the same direction, toward the long row of buildings that back onto the water. A man passes pushing an empty handcart, its wheels loud on the stones, hurrying to get it off the street before the daylight crowds make that impossible. Cart traffic belongs to the night in this city, and the last of it is always rushing to finish before the sun makes the decision for them. The Horia come into view the way they always do, first as a wall, long and featureless, broken by a line of dark openings that will become doorways once there's enough light to see them properly. Even from here you can hear it. Voices, the thud of sacks being set down, the creak of a door being forced along its track. Lamps flicker inside some of the openings, small points of orange against the grey stone, and figures move past them, carrying, stacking, calling out to one another in the particular shorthand of men who have done this work together for years. You quicken your pace slightly. Somewhere inside one of those buildings is the shipment that came in overnight, and somewhere among those waiting sacks is the thing that's been sitting at the edge of your thoughts since before you opened your eyes, a feeling more than a fact yet that not everything in that delivery is going to be what it should be. You've learned to trust that feeling. It's kept your name worth something for a long time. Near the gate, a boy from one of the bakeries is already waiting, hunched against the cold with his hands tucked into his sleeves, clearly hoping to catch someone about yesterday's order before the morning gets too busy to talk. You give him a nod as you pass. He'll wait, they always do, and step through into the warehouse, where the smell of grain rises up around you, thick and dry, and the real work of the day begins. Inside, the air is warmer than the street, though not by much, and thick with the smell of grain, dry and faintly sweet, mixed with the must of old sacking and the sharper smell of oil from the lamps set along the walls. Rows of sacks rise on either side of you, stacked higher than your head in places, each row separated by a narrow aisle just wide enough for a man carrying a load on his shoulder. Somewhere ahead, you can hear the steady rhythm of sacks being set down, one after another, and the lower murmur of men talking as they work. A man near the entrance looks up as you pass, lifts a hand in greeting, and goes back to what he's doing. He's one of the warehouse overseers, the kind of man who's worked these aisles long enough that he doesn't need to look at a tablet to know roughly how much grain is sitting in any given section. He'll have the tablets ready for you all the same. That's how it's done. You find him a few rows in, crouched beside a stack of sacks with a wax tablet balanced on his knee, a stylus moving across it in quick practice strokes. He doesn't stop writing as you approach, just tilts the tablet slightly so you can see the marks already there. Numbers, counts, the shipment that came in overnight, broken down by the hold it came from, and the section of the warehouse it's been placed in. You crouch beside him and run a hand along the nearest sack, feeling the give of it under your palm, the grain shifting slightly inside the coarse fabric. It feels right. Full, dry, settled the way good grain settles. You move to the next one, and the next, your hand finding the same give each time the same dry weight. The overseer gestures with the stylus toward a section further down the row, not looking up from the tablet. That end, he says, started on it an hour ago. Wanted your eyes on it before we go further. You leave him to his counting and walk down the aisle, your sandals scuffing softly against the packed earth floor. The lamps are spaced further apart here, and the light falls in pools, leaving stretches of shadow between them. You can hear labourers working somewhere beyond the next row, the thud and scrape of sacks being shifted, a low exchange of words between two men working in rhythm with each other. The sacks at the far end look the same as the others from a distance. It's only when you put your hand on the first one that you notice it. The give is different, heavier in a way that isn't simply more grain. You press your fingers into it and feel something closer to resistance, a faint dampness through the fabric that the others didn't have. You crouch down and work at the cord holding the sack closed, fingers finding the knot and loosening it with the kind of motion you've done so many times it barely requires thought. The neck of the sack falls open, and you reach in, scooping up a handful of grain and lifting it close to your face. The smell reaches you before you can really look at it. Not the dry, clean smell of the other sacks, but something with an edge to it, faintly sour, the kind of smell that grain takes on when it's been damp longer than it should have been. You roll the kernels between your fingers, feeling for the give that tells you whether they're still hard and sound or starting to soften. Some of them are fine, others give too easily under the pressure of your thumb, the outer layer breaking apart in a way it shouldn't. You bring a few kernels to your mouth and bite down, and the texture confirms what your fingers already told you. Not ruined, not yet, but not what the rest of this shipment is. You straighten up and call back toward the overseer, your voice carrying easily down the row. He looks up from the tablet, sees you holding the open sack, and sets the tablet down before making his way over, two labourers following a few steps behind him, drawn by the change in your posture more than anything you've said. Between the three of you, you start working through the section sack by sack, your hands moving fast now, untying cords, testing weight, scooping handfuls and letting the grain run back through your fingers. The labourers fall into the rhythm with you, lifting each sack just enough for you to test before setting it back down, or, for the ones that fail, shifting it a few steps to one side, beginning a separate pile that grows slowly as you work your way along the row. By the time you reach the end of the section, the second pile is large enough that it can't be ignored, and small enough that it doesn't have to be a disaster either. Somewhere out past the warehouse doors, the boy from the bakery is probably still waiting, and somewhere further than that, the man responsible for this shipment is going about his morning without yet knowing that part of it has just been set aside. That conversation will come later. For now, there's still the rest of the warehouse to get through, and the morning is only just beginning. The morning settles into its rhythm the way it always does, once the first problem of the day has been identified and set aside rather than solved. The overseer takes 2 of the labourers to continue working through the remaining rows, checking each section the way you taught him years ago, while you turn your attention to the tablets. You find a quieter spot near the wall, where a shaft of light falls through one of the high openings and gives you enough to see by, and you sit on an overturned crate with a fresh tablet across your knees. The stylus feels familiar in your hand, worn smooth along one side from years of the same grip. You begin marking out the section that's been set aside, the count of sacks, their rough condition, the section of the warehouse they came from. Nothing more than that for now. The details of who will need to know about it and how it will be explained can wait until there's more to tell them. You're partway through the count when you hear footsteps approaching along the main aisle, slower and more deliberate than the quick working pace of the labourers. A man appears between 2 stacks of sacks, a tablet of his own tucked under one arm, and you recognise him before he's close enough to speak. He works for one of the larger mills on the far side of the city, and he comes through often enough that you know his walk before you know his face. He greets you with a nod and gets straight to business the way he usually does. He's looking for a quantity of grain to fill an order, and he names a figure that's well within what the warehouse can supply from the good stock. You set the tablet aside and lead him back into the rows, walking the aisle slowly while he runs his own hands over a few of the sacks, testing them the same way you did earlier, though with less practiced fingers. He seems satisfied, and the 2 of you settle into the familiar back and forth of agreeing on a price, his voice steady and unhurried, yours matching it. Numbers pass between you, adjusted slightly, agreed upon. When it's settled, you call over one of the labourers, and together you begin moving the agreed amount toward the scale near the entrance, sack by sack, each one lifted onto the broad wooden platform and balanced against the weights on the other side until the beam sits level. The weighing takes time, the kind of slow, repetitive time that fills most of a morning like this. Lift, set down, balance, record. Lift, set down, balance, record. The mill worker watches each weighing closely, though without suspicion, simply out of habit, the same habit that makes you watch just as closely from your side. When the last sack settles onto the scale and the beam steadies, you both nod at the same moment, and the tablets are marked to match. By the time he leaves, his own men following behind to begin carrying the sacks out toward a waiting cart. The light coming through the high openings has shifted, grown a little stronger, and your stomach reminds you that the morning has gone on longer than you noticed. You eat where you are, more or less. Someone brings round a basket of bread and a handful of olives, the same thing most days, and you eat standing near the scale, watching the last of the mill workers' sacks disappear out through the doorway. The bread is plain, slightly stale from sitting since yesterday, but it's filling, and the olives are sharp enough to wake up a mouth that's been dry from grain dust all morning. You eat without hurrying, but without lingering either. There's still the rest of the warehouse to get through, and the separated pile near the back wall hasn't gone anywhere. When you've finished, you wipe your hands on your tunic and head back into the rows, picking up where the count left off. The overseer meets you part way, his own tablet filled with marks now, the remaining sections checked and found sound. Good news, in its way, though it leaves the morning's problem standing out more clearly than ever. The one section of damp, sour grain sitting apart from everything else, waiting for someone to decide what becomes of it. You crouch beside the separated pile again, running your hand over the nearest sack out of habit more than need, The grain inside has settled further since this morning, the dampness working its way through. It won't get better by sitting here. Somewhere across the city, the man who sold this shipment is going about his day with no idea that part of it is sitting in a pile against your warehouse wall, and at some point before the day is finished, that's a conversation the two of you are going to need to have. The afternoon moves differently than the morning did. The warehouse is still busy, but the urgency has thinned out, replaced by a steadier kind of motion, the sort that comes once the day's main business has mostly been settled, and what remains is finishing what's already begun. You're standing near the separated pile again, going over it once more with the overseer, when one of the labourers comes hurrying down the aisle to tell you someone's waiting near the entrance. A man you recognise, though not well, representing the shipper whose grain this was. He's come to check on the delivery, the way they sometimes do the day after a shipment arrives, and from the careful way he's standing near the doorway, you suspect word has already reached him that something wasn't quite right. You meet him near the entrance and walk him back yourself, past the rows of good grain, already lighter than they were this morning, toward the section set aside against the wall. He crouches beside it the way you did earlier, opening one of the sacks and running grain through his fingers, and you watch his expression change as he feels what you felt. There's no argument in it. He's seen damp grain before, knows what it looks like and what it means, and knows too that there's no point pretending otherwise when the evidence is sitting in his hands. The conversation that follows is quiet, practical, the kind that happens between two men who expect to do business again and have no interest in making this harder than it needs to be. You suggest what you'd already been thinking through while you worked. The damp grain isn't worthless. It's not fit for the bakeries that supply the better households, not yet, but there's always demand for grain at a lower price, from places that aren't as particular, that will use it quickly before it has a chance to get worse. You name a reduced figure for that portion, low enough to reflect the condition honestly, and he considers it for a moment before agreeing, the way men do when they know the alternative is worse for everyone. The overseer marks the new figures onto the tablet while the two of you talk, and by the time the shipper's man leaves, the matter is settled. Tomorrow, someone will come to collect the separated grain at the agreed price, and the section of wall it's been sitting against will be empty again, ready for whatever arrives next. With that done, the rest of the afternoon feels lighter. You walk the rows again, slower this time, checking in with the labourers as they finish stacking and resettling the sacks that were moved during the morning's work. One of them mentions, almost as an aside, that he saw a string of carts gathering near the gate further down, waiting for dusk before they are allowed to move through the streets. Grain that left here only this morning is already on its way toward ovens across the city, and more will follow once the light fades enough for the carts to roll. The light through the high openings has changed again, softer now, the gold of midday giving way to something gentler. You find yourself walking more slowly than you did this morning, less because there's less to do, and more because the day has settled into you, the way it always does by this point. Near the entrance, the boy from the bakery is gone, his order long since collected and on its way back to wherever it's needed. In his place, a different face. An older man this time, someone you've dealt with before, here to confirm a delivery for tomorrow morning. The exchange is brief. A few words, a glance at the tablet, a nod, and he's gone again, back out into the street where the light is beginning to take on the deeper colour of late afternoon. You make your way back to the tablets one more time before the day ends, going over the marks made since morning, the counts, the sale, the separated grain, the new arrangement for tomorrow. Nothing about it feels remarkable. It's the same shape the day usually takes, give or take the particular details, and there's a quiet satisfaction in seeing it all laid out clearly, each mark accounting for something that actually happened. Outside, the warehouse district is settling into its evening rhythm. Lamps are being lit in doorways. Somewhere down toward the water, you can hear the creak of a barge being secured against the dock for the night. the kind of sound that's become so familiar you barely register it anymore. The overseer locks the smaller storage rooms one by one, the heavy doors swinging shut with a sound that echoes briefly down the empty aisles before fading. You take one last look down the main row before you leave, the sacks settled into their places, the section near the wall smaller now than it looked this morning, already accounted for and already, in its way, finished. Tomorrow will bring its own version of today, another shipment, another set of tablets, another set of hands to check. For now, the warehouse is quiet, the light is fading, and the walk home is waiting. The walk home takes you along streets that are only just beginning to wake up for the night. Carts that spent the day waiting near the warehouse gates are moving now, their wheels loud against the stone in a way they never are during daylight hours, when the streets belong to people on foot and carts have to wait their turn until dark. You step aside more than once to let one pass, the driver giving a brief nod as he goes, the cart piled with sacks you recognize the shape of even in the fading light. Somewhere ahead of it, an oven is waiting for what it's carrying. By the time you reach your own door, the last of the daylight has gone, replaced by the soft glow of lamps in windows along the street. Inside, the air is warmer than outside, and the smell of something cooking reaches you before you fully step through the doorway. It's a small thing, but it settles something in you, the way it always does after a day spent among sacks and tablets and the dry smell of grain. You eat without much conversation, tired in the particular way that comes from a day spent on your feet, bending, lifting, crouching, standing again. The meal is simple. Bread, something warm alongside it, a cup of wine that tastes better for being the end of the day rather than the start of it. Your hands still smell faintly of grain dust. No matter how many times you've washed them, the smell worked so deeply into your skin by now that it barely registers as a smell at all anymore. It's just part of what you are, the same way the calluses on your palms are. Afterward you sit for a while before going to sleep, not doing much of anything, just letting the day settle. Your thoughts drift back over it without much effort, the way they tend to at the end of a long day. The damp grain, set aside this morning, already accounted for and already in its way dealt with. The mill worker's steady voice as the two of you agreed on a price. The careful way the shipper's man had crouched beside the separated pile this afternoon, neither of you needing to say much because the grain itself had said it for you. None of it feels like very much, taken on its own. A shipment arrives. Some of it is good, and some of it isn't. The good grain moves on, toward mills and ovens across the city, and the rest is dealt with as honestly as it can be, so that tomorrow's business with the same people remains as steady as today's was. It's the kind of day that probably looked, from the outside, like nothing at all happened. And yet here you are, tired in your legs and your back, your hands marked with a day's work, having spent it all the same. Outside, the sound of carts continues faintly, the city's nighttime rhythm carrying on without you, now that your part in it is finished for the day. Somewhere out there, the grain that left the warehouse this morning is closer to becoming bread than it was when you woke. Tomorrow there will be more of it, arriving the way it always does, and the same hands, yours and others, will be there to receive it. You bank the lamp down to a low glow, just enough to see by, and let the quiet of the house settle around you. The work doesn't disappear when the day ends. Not really. It only waits, patiently, for the next one to begin. And for now, that's enough. The grain is moving, the city is being fed, and your part in it, small as it might seem, is done for today. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the past. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss another ordinary life. Until next time, remember, every road, loaf of bread, fishing net, workshop, and home was built by hands history rarely recorded. This has been History of Ordinary People. Live the lives history forgot.